guys, Miss Bishop here. I just wanted to walk you through really quickly what today's assignment looks like. As you know, or you should have noticed, that this week, along with our spiral review, deals a lot with decimals. Miss Spiegel started off the week talking about the decimal place values, so you should be familiar with that. But just to recap, I have a place value chart pulled up for you on my screen, so we're just going to walk through a couple of things to keep in mind. Okay, so we all know, or we should know by now, that to the left of the decimal are our whole numbers. We talked about these in August. We tested on them. We should know by now that our lowest whole number spot is the ones, and it goes up from there to the tens, hundreds, thousands, and we can keep going. Now, I like to tell my students that the farther you get away from the decimal on the left-hand side, so it's kind of like your words get larger. So you have the ones, then you have the tens, hundreds, thousands. And I tell them to keep that in mind because it kind of is operated the same way on the right side of the decimal. Okay, so the farther we get away from the decimal, the larger the names of the place values seem to get. Now, obviously, you should know by now we don't have a ones place, but we do have a tenths place. That is the place value closest to the decimal. So if you're looking at the right side of the decimal, the tenths place is going to be directly to the right. Now, just like over here after the tens place, we have the hundreds. Same concept on the right side. So after the tenths place, we have the hundreds. So just like over here, the farther you move to the left of the decimal, the bigger your words get. Right here, the farther you move away from the decimal to the right, the bigger your words get. Okay, so keep that in mind because that's going to help us to not only read the decimals, but it's going to help us correlate that into a fraction and look at it as a model. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, I'm going to bring you over to what your assignment looks like for today. Now, the first page that I just skipped over was nothing but review, so I'm not really going to go over that because that's nothing new. It had some rounding, some things on that, and if you have problems with it, just message your teacher. But this is really what I wanted to focus on. If you look at this paper, you see a lot of models. Okay, so let's just read the intro. It says, guess what? You can create equivalent decimals and fractions with tenths and hundredths. So they want you to look at the models to the left. Okay, now look at the difference between A and B. What do you notice about how they're split up? Okay, A is split up into 10-6. So there are 10, 10-6, in a hundreds block. Okay, this can represent our block, our square, whatever you want to think of it as. Okay, so A is split up into 8, 10-6 being shaded out of 10. So 8 out of 10, 8 tenths is shaded. Now look at B. B, however, is not split into 10-6. It is split into little bitty ones, and we know that it takes 100 little ones to equal a 100s block. So this is split up into hundredths. So again, A is split up into tenths, B is split up into hundredths, and I can see that clearly because I can go through and count how many pieces I have in my whole. Now, I have 8 out of 10 shaded over here, so 8 tenths, and then I have 80 100ths shaded over here. Okay, so they're saying that these models represent the same value. Look at these models. Do you agree that they cover up the same amount of our whole? If you said yes, then you are correct. Because A, even though it's split into 10-6, it's split into tenths, if you went through and split all of these tenths up to where it made 100 little ones, you would have 80 covered. That's the only difference here, guys. Right here, you have 80 100ths, so 80 little ones, and right here, you just have 8 10-6. So they just put in a little bit more work and made your pieces smaller. These are still equivalent. So if I gave you this as a fraction form, you say, oh, okay, Miss Bishop, those are equivalent fractions. They cover up the same amount of our whole. Guys, it's the same thing with decimal. So 8 tenths is equivalent to 80 100ths. And if you see right here, this says 8 tenths. I know this because I say the number 8 and then whatever place value it ends in is the last name it gets. So 8/10 is the same thing as, read the number, 80, and then ends in the hundredths place. So that's 80/100ths. 8/10 covers up the same amount of value, same amount of our whole as 80/100ths. So those are equivalent decimals or equivalent fractions, whichever way it is written. So your task here is to go through and look at number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you have to determine what the fraction would look like and what the decimal would look like. Okay, so make sure you're counting your pieces in your whole. I'm going to give you a hint. Your whole is either going to be in tenths or hundredths. Okay, so you have a 50-50 shot of starting this off and getting it right. Okay, so your whole is going to be either tenths or hundredths, and then you're going to have to write that as a fraction, however much is shaded out of your whole, and then you're going to have to correlate it into a decimal. Okay, and then 3 and 4 down here are pretty much the same thing as your example. Okay, so if you need to, look back up here and it kind of walks you through the steps and the way of thinking. If you have any more questions about this, please let me or your teachers know. Okay, bye guys.